Hi there, welcome back to the office for another Dave's Desk. Today we've reached the book of Daniel and the story of Daniel. You're probably familiar with it. It's one of those classic parts of the Bible that gets turned into a story full of villains and monsters. And it concerns Daniel, who was an Israelite living in exile in the nation of Babylon. We said last time when we were talking about the book of Isaiah that God warned his people that there'd be a time of struggle and to come, and that was fulfilled when the nations of Israel broke apart and then were invaded and dominated by the nations around them, and the people of Jerusalem were taken off as slaves into Babylon. And Daniel was one of these Jewish slaves in Babylon, and he rose up through the ranks of the civil service in equivalent, and he was given authority and was part of the king's one of the king's counselors, and he found great favour. The king appreciated his wisdom and his skill, and I guess, like a great many outsiders and experts, this brought real dislike from those who were on the inside. And so the court of the king of Babylon conspired and tried to find ways of getting Daniel into trouble. But Daniel wasn't making any trouble. He was doing as he was supposed to be doing, and he was serving faithfully. And so they invented trouble for him to fall into. They convinced the king to do something very egocentric, which I guess has always been a problem for kings, avoiding things that are egocentric. And they had him make a law to say that all prayer had to be focused on him. God complex, thought people should pray to him, enacted it as a law. You can see why he needed wise counsellors, clearly not the most sensible of rulers. And so David hears there's a new law: you can only pray to the king. You have to stop praying to anyone else. And prayer was an important, regular part of David's day, but not to the king, but to his God, to the Lord Most High, the Lord of Hosts. And so David resolved he wasn't going to bow to the pressure. He was going to continue to pray and to be faithful to God, that he was willing to risk everything to remain faithful to God. And so he continued to go into his room to pray, and he was discovered. He didn't hide it particularly. He didn't sort of pray whilst doing other parts of his work. He formally and physically prayed. And so he was found. The king was forced to condemn him to the punishment that he prescribed, which is spend the night in the lion's den. And so that night Daniel was thrown down into where all the lions were kept, with the anticipation that he would be eaten. And the king just wishes him well. May your God keep you safe. And that prayer is answered. And the king rushes back the next morning to see if Daniel has survived, and indeed there is Daniel sat with the lions sleeping around him, saying, "Look, God sent an angel who bound up the mouths of the lions, and I'm fine." And so God has Daniel taken out of the den and says, no, actually you need, as a nation, he changes the law so that people are encouraged to pray to the Lord God. And my reflection on that was partly just, how do we treat the outsider in our midst? How do we welcome those who seem foreign and seem alien? How do we remain humble when people come in who are better at us, at the thing that we're good at? You know, if your identity is being good at something and someone else turns up whose story you don't know, who you don't have a relationship with, and they're better than you, how do we cope with that? I think the only way that we can really cope with that is knowing that our identity is not in what we do or how clever or skillful we are, but as children of God. And also that truth that God is worth everything. He's worth the struggle and the fear of praying when praying is banned. He's worth going down into the lion's den, even if for us the lion's mouths aren't kept closed. I'm always reminded when I think of this story of the martyrs, the Christian martyrs who were thrown to the beasts, who weren't saved in the same way that Daniel was saved. And just that realisation that then, for many of us, will be times when we have to accept struggle and suffering. Probably not that particular type of struggle and suffering, but struggle and suffering because of our commitment, and we need to be willing and ready to embrace that. I hope that's been something to think about for you, something to reflect upon. Please do feel free to comment and discuss underneath, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.